Welcome to the Carnivore Cast, a podcast focused on the carnivore diet and lifestyle, with practical advice from successful carnivores, citizen scientists, and top researchers. I'm your host, Scott Myslinski, and I'm here to speak with experts and experienced carnivores to get answers to your biggest and meatiest questions while helping you live your best life as a carnivore. If you enjoy the show, please consider supporting the Carnivore Cast on Patreon. By becoming a patron, you'll help us reach more people and continue to create content on carnivore. There are also exclusive perks available, such as private Q&As, consultations with me, and more. Become a supporter at patreon.com/carnivorecast. Check the episode description for the link. Thank you, and I'll see you there. Mike McCain is a father, husband, and a man with an incredibly inspiring story. Mike has overcome painkiller addiction, food addiction, and lost 110 pounds on the carnivore diet. He's been featured on various podcasts, sharing his thoughts and introspections on his own battles with addiction and how others can help deal with it as well. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Thanks for having me, man. I'm excited for this. Really am.
Me too. Been looking forward to this. So how did addiction start in your life?
As I've shared on the other podcasts, I think it really started, especially food addiction, which this is the crazy thing about this whole thing, Scott, is that I did not recognize that I was a food addict or a sugar addict until probably about 6 months to a year ago. But If I was to go back and look at my history and the decisions I started making, it all started to happen around my third and fourth grade years in grade school, and had some family issues, some traumatic experiences and that sort of thing. And I always, share this, that is about the time that I started to get really bad habits of eating, using food to cope with emotions. And that was emotions, whether they're good or bad or anything else. And so again, I think that's the reason why I get so excited to share my story, is because when it all started, all those dots started connecting. When I started looking back at grade school, I started looking back at the experiences I started having in junior high and high school with bullying and everything else, and really not even understanding that I had that food addiction until just recently. It all started connecting, and then it all started like going, man, I've got to share this, because there's got to be other people that have gone through this same thing, and how I came across the ability, I guess, to overcome the addiction, whether it's painkiller addiction or the food addiction, was something that transpired just naturally, and I did it by accident, and I was so grateful that it happened, whatever. So if I was to start from the very beginning, as far as how this addiction started, I would say I was a sugar addict before I became a painkiller addict. And to back that up, I have to look back at those third and fourth grade years when I started looking at food as my coping mechanism to handle stress and other emotions, and just did not even understand that until within the last year or so. It's been crazy. So that's when it all started, and it got worse. As I went into junior high, and the weight that I gained, and then being bullied, and then it just became a vicious cycle.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And I'm sorry to hear that you suffered through that, and the trauma side especially. I've been revisiting some of my own, I guess for lack of a better term, we'll call them like neural pathways, just kind of ways of thinking, loops you have in your head of
Yep.
thoughts and stories you tell yourself. And a lot of them stem from, I luckily was not a victim of any of the traditional types of trauma. But I've still had jarring emotional experiences at times in my life. And so many of them are like things that I almost couldn't remember when asked about. But if I really do some deep introspective work or work with a therapist or other professional, you can help uncover how some of these things stem back to even memories that you've totally lost. So I find that really fascinating.
Yeah, and I think, I know you're in your 20s. If I remember right, I think I was listening to one of your podcasts last week. But it blows my mind, Scott, that I think about this and go, and I just turned 49 about 2 months ago, And I'm just now learning this stuff about myself. It is so weird. But I look back, and think to myself, that was third and fourth grade years, those eating habits. I could never understand why my little brother could almost, in a sense, he could eat whatever he wanted to, and he was thin. And then I basically just looked at food. I mean, this is what's in my mind, right? I just look at food and I get fat, which which really wasn't the case. Obviously, I was eating lots of calories and stuff at the time, but I just, like I said, coming to the realization that I had that sugar addiction, and then how basically it fed into the painkiller addiction, and I just replaced one addiction for the other, and then now taking a step back because I've overcome both of those, and to sit there and think, you know, other people need to know and recognize these addictions or whatever, because I truly believe, and we can get into like any of this kind of stuff, but I truly believe that food addiction, I got to get in the habit of saying carb addiction or sugar addiction. It's not really food addiction, because you got to eat food, right? You have to eat food in order to exist, but it's really a sugar addiction. And when I think about having to overcome that is so much more insidious than the painkiller addiction was, right? Because you have to go through a lot of work. I did anyway, a lot of work to get the painkillers. I wasn't just buying them off the streets. I was getting them from a doctor. I was taking them, with a prescription and that sort of thing. But the sugar addiction is something I look at now, and I start seeing patterns of these in other people, my friends, my family that I know, and I'm starting to get to the point like I have to warn them. You have to be careful, like the way that this sneaks up on you, and you don't even realize it, and the next thing you know, you're struggling with your health, and that's why I become so passionate about sharing it, is because of that, the insidiousness of it.
Yeah. Why do you think it took you so long, personally, at least, to realize your addictions?
I don't, because I didn't understand addiction. I think that's probably the biggest thing. And I'll go back to the painkiller addiction because that's really how I learned it. Right. So when I was about 35, 36 years old, I got into CrossFit, and I had lifted weights for a lot of years since I was 12 years old. I loved lifting weights. It fascinated me. I loved everything about it. And I was always concerned with my, like how I lifted, and being safe and going through the proper motion. Cause I did a lot of squats, deadlift, hang cleans, bench press, stuff like that, for powerlifting. And I was always careful. I always wore a belt. And then my brother-in-law talked me into doing CrossFit, which I loved it, right? He feels bad. He's like, Mike, I'm so sorry I got you into that because it really hurt your back, whatever. And I loved it. I loved everything about it. I loved the challenge of it and everything. But I was doing a workout and had no idea, Scott, that I had been basically powerlifting for 22 years with degenerative disc disease.
Wow.
And what happened was I was doing a workout, and I was doing I think the workout was 20 hang cleans with 60 pounds, and then running a 400 as fast as you could. And I think you did 3 or 4 rounds per time. And it was my last set, and I was just trying to get that 60 pounds up, as fast as I could. And the very last rep, and the 20th one, I snapped it up on the last round, that fourth round. And oh my gosh, that pain was so bad. I fell to the ground, and I couldn't really move for almost 10 minutes because the pain was so bad. I seriously thought I got a hernia, even because the pain went from my, left part of my lower back all the way around to the front. And I've had hernia operation before. I thought it was a hernia. And, but here's the crazy thing. And this is what is so wild, and getting into the painkiller stuff, is that I've hurt my back before lifting weights, never doing something stupid like that, but I've just hurt my back, and it always got better. It never got better this time. And after about 3 or 4 months, I just got so tired of it that I finally went to the doctor and said, listen, I can't sleep at night. That was the worst. And I've shared this, like I said, on another podcast. The worst part of all of this was the pain was just super annoying, and I couldn't sleep at night. And when you can't sleep, it makes everything worse, right? It makes that pain even worse. And so I just said, I need something to help me sleep. And so he gave me some pain pills. And again, like I mentioned, the other ones, I took 2, didn't do anything for me. The next night I took 4, and that was that was when the doors opened for the addiction. And 8 years went by, Scott, and I was taking, the most I ever took in a day was probably, I think, 22 pills in a day. And
Wow.
it was, yeah, it got up to be pretty high. So I thought that I was managing it, managing it well, I think I had 22 pills a day. That's good as long as I don't go over 20 or 22 pills. But after, 8 years of taking pills and getting higher dosing and things like that, my wife basically, said it's time. You can't come back home until you until you go to rehab. And man, it was so crazy. But this is where my education began. And when you asked that question, like, why did it take so long? Because it was even 3 years after I went to rehab, Scott, that I realized I had the sugar addiction, right? Or longer than that, to realize I had a sugar addiction. But it was because I went to rehab and learned about painkiller addiction and addiction in families, how addiction can be passed down genetically, and that sort of thing, that the dots all started getting connected here within the last year. So I went to rehab. And when I was in rehab, I fought, the fact that I was an addict for a lot of years, right? People would, say, Mike, you've got a problem, whatever, but I just didn't care because, well, I'm taking the painkillers for a reason because I'm in pain. And so, maybe I am addicted. It doesn't really bother me. But what I learned in rehab that kind of opened my eyes a little bit was the fact that one of the things they talk about in there, or, how some people who are alcoholics or whatever, some of them are genetically inclined, or a lot of them actually are genetically inclined for that. And so they talked about how if you have alcoholism or drug addiction on one side of your family, like on your mom's side, that you have a 50% chance that you'll be an addict if you start taking those substances. If you have alcoholics or drug addicts on both sides of your family, if you start drinking or you start taking substance, you have a 9 out of 10 chance that you're going to be an addict. Like there's no way that you can moderate, in essence. Like you're always going to have to, just worry about being addicted to this. And again, still being in that rehab, I had a lot of other emotions that were going through my mind at the time, which was, holy cow, what am I going to do for the pain when I get out of here now that I can't take it? But that little lesson right there stuck with me. So I'm starting to think like, well, wait a minute. I'm going to look back at my family now. Holy cow, I've seen my uncles on my dad's side of the family. I don't think I ever saw them growing up without a beer in their hand, ever. And then in my mom's side, my family, like my grandfather was an alcoholic. His brother was an alcoholic. And so I started realizing, oh my gosh, I do have it in my genetics that I'm an addict, that it's in there. And, so I started reading, other things of people that would start drinking alcohol, at a young age or whatever, and they might drink, 5 or 6 or 7 beers the first time they've ever drank, ever. They drink 5 or 6 of them and not feel anything. And their friends can't believe it. They're like, oh my gosh, how come you're not feeling anything? I don't know. They just keep drinking, and they don't realize that, it's in their genetics or whatever, that they're going to be, alcoholics. And I think back now that I just said that actually out loud, again, I think of Dr. Krywis, whatever, the carb addiction doc, like how he, is talking about how the drug addiction, it starts, or the carb addiction starts now as a fetus in the mother's womb. And you're just like, that's just so scary. You're setting up these little babies for addiction because they're already sugar addicted before they even get out of the womb. And that's just so crazy to me. And when I think about that, like, again, I look back at, like, I never drank, I never smoked, I didn't do any of that kind of stuff until I hurt my back when I was 36 and started taking painkillers. So you think that, like, I was 36 years old, but I was a sugar addict by that time. I was a food addict. I weighed 290 pounds at that time. My highest I ever got up to was 304. But the thing is that I didn't, again, understand the sugar or the food addiction, that was setting me up for a perfect storm of just addiction in general, whether it's painkillers or alcoholism, if I started drinking or anything like that. And to answer your question, I mean, man, that's a long explanation, but to answer your question, like, it just never dawned on me. And I think that's the danger of it all, right? Like even when I went for painkiller addiction, I just did not understand addiction in general. I just didn't. And I still definitely didn't understand that I was a food addict. Didn't understand that at all. And like I said, I overcome the food addiction um, by accident because I went carnivore. It's just weird.
This episode is brought to you by Element Electrolytes. We know that salt, potassium, and magnesium are essential minerals, especially for those on carnivore, keto, and low-carb diets to relieve hunger, dizziness, cramps, headaches, and keep so many of your bodily processes running optimally, including sleep, brain and mental health, hormonal health, your heart, immunity, and more. Element electrolytes are convenient, evidence-based, and delicious. My wife and I have been using Element for years, every single day. They're great for fueling hard workouts, getting adapted and beating keto flu, fasting, traveling with them, and kickstarting your day with energy. They're used by Navy SEALs, Olympic weightlifters, jiu-jitsu athletes, and everyday people who want to make themselves better, like you and me. They're also founded by superhero Rob Wolf. LMNT is offering free, that's right, free people, Element sample packs to Carnivore Cast listeners. All you have to do is pay for shipping. Go to drinklmnt.com/carnivorecast to claim this awesome deal. That's drinklmnt.com/carnivorecast, one word, and I'll include a link in the show notes. Out of curiosity, what was the painkiller you were taking?
I took a lot of different ones, right?
Oh,
so
okay.
I went from, hydrocodone was the first, just a general, that's, 5 milligram hydrocodones. Then it went up to 10 milligram. And then I went to Percocets. The one that I took the most actually though was methadone. That's the stuff that they give heroin addicts, to get off of heroin. I took methadone for like five years. And the reason why I took methadone is because it didn't, like the Percocets or the hydrocodones would only last about 3 or 4 hours. And I did try to like Oxycontins and that sort of thing, but the time release in those capsules, whatever, just they wouldn't digest or something when I couldn't feel any pain relief or anything from those. And, people would say, why don't you just crush them up? I'm like, why? Because I'm taking them for the pain. I'm like, I'm going to crush them up and do that. Like, I want the pain relief. I don't want the high. I want the pain relief. And so those didn't work for me, but the methadones were awesome because they were long lasting. I didn't have to take as many. For 5 years, I took those. And what's weird is, Scott, is that when I went into rehab, I was only taking 4 pills a day by that time. But those 4 pills, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it comes after 8 years of taking painkillers, I could not break free of those 4 pills even. I still, even with 4 pills for almost a year, was still even a month after rehab, a month after getting out, just still jonesing for them. Thinking like, oh man, I could go for some right now. It's weird how attached they are. And again, I learned that it takes a long time for those painkillers to get out of your system, especially if you've taken them for years, that it's in, I don't know, the way that I kind of heard is like, it's just in every stinking fiber of your body, man. It's in your bones, it's everywhere, man. And so your body just, and your brain just have to completely relearn almost how to rewire to deal with pain, to deal with, emotions, things like that. No different than anybody else who's dealing with sugar addiction as well.
Yeah.
So it's crazy.
It's crazy how deep those addictions and those neural circuits run. And you mentioned kind of your wife and her saying it's the last straw and you going to rehab. And I want to talk about your rehab experience. Super curious to learn about that. But before I get into that, were there multiple times it felt like this is it and this is the last straw, or was that the big event, or did you have multiple of those over the years or over a certain time period?
That was probably the big event, but there were so many things that led up to that big event where she finally just said, enough's enough. You can't come back into the house until you go to rehab. We lost everything, Scott. Like I I had my own company for 8 years, 9 years, I think, or whatever. And we got sued by a competitor just because they didn't want competition. It cost me $500,000 in legal fees, probably $2 or $3 million over the course of 2 or 3 years. At the same time, I was going through the addiction or whatever. And so we lost everything. We lost the business. We lost our house or whatever. And so that's when she, finally said, I don't know if she, in her mind, she was thinking, like, your drug addiction cost us all this, rather than just being sued by a competitor and was having to spend all our money on legal fees and things like that. I think part of it was, look what you've done to our family. You're not coming back until this gets better or whatever. There was probably 3 or 4 other times in between there where my family had set me down and they wanted to do an intervention. Like they wanted to do, but they just couldn't express it. They couldn't get it out, and it just became basically kind of like family counsel or just kind of a conversation or whatever. And it was weird because they would make such a big deal out of it, and then we'd sit there and nothing would happen. I'm like, that was weird. But I didn't connect the dots. They're trying to push me and nudge me to saying, you need to go to rehab. Enough is enough. And but when everything just really fell apart, when I won the lawsuit, just so you know, but it cost me everything financially. So we lost our house, we lost everything, and we were actually living with my in-laws at the time, and I don't remember what the deal was, but I was like up in just northern Nebraska visiting my mom, and I came home after a couple of days, and that's when she said, you can't come back in the house until you go to rehab. And so I was like, fine, I'll go to rehab. This is stupid, but I'll go to rehab. And so I drove all the way back up to where my mom lived, and she dropped me off at the rehab clinic. And that's where it all started. So I left all my pills there at the house. The pills that I had left, and just gotten a prescription refilled like the day before, and left it all there and just went up to O'Neill and went to Valley Hope. So that was it. It kind of, there was a culmination. So it was money wise, and also worried about the addiction too. That it all just kind of came to a head at the same time.
And what was rehab like? Talk about your experience there.
It was very hard for me what I started to say is basically it was very hard for me to fit in. And there was a couple reasons for that. One of those reasons is that I was in there. Valley Hope, the rehab clinic I was in, is very well known for alcoholism. And so almost 95% of the people in there were alcoholics. I think there was two people in my group that that were heroin addicts, and then me as a painkiller addict and that sort of thing. What's crazy too is that, I talk about I had a traumatic family experience growing up, but that was because we had foster brothers and sisters, and it was with them. It wasn't, my parents or anything like that. I grew up in a very loving family, and it did not take me very long to figure out that most of these people in rehab had gone through unbelievable challenges in their lives, physical abuse, sexual abuse, all kinds of things. And it was very foreign to me, to hear all of that and then to be in there. Plus, as a painkiller addict, the heroin addicts were given like methadone or something else. I can't remember what the other one was called that they get, Suboxone or something like that. But they get that, and then the alcoholics got Xanax or something like that, where basically I was just straight cold turkey, man. That first 6 days of being in rehab clinic, I didn't sleep. Like, I did not sleep one stinking wink for 6 days. It was a horrible experience. All I did was just walk around the grounds because I couldn't leave the grounds. So I just walked around in big circles all night long, all through the night. And then I would come back into this room. They called it the Shake Shack, where you kind of go through your withdrawals and things. And there was probably 8, 9 other people that was during that 6 days that actually came in that were alcoholics, came in and were out of the Shake Shack within 24 hours. And I just was in there day in and day out. And I just wanted to sleep so bad. That's the thing that I think I remember the most, is just wanting to sleep and begging the nurses and the doctors, like, please just give me something to sleep. I want to sleep. And they wouldn't do it. Like, no, we got to get this out of your system. And I said, wait, it's not fair, because you're giving these alcoholics this Xanax or whatever it was. I said, I just want to sleep. And they're like, I understand, but you can't. And hey, that was horrible. So I would sit in these rooms, and I want to share this experience. I don't think I've shared this before, but I remember that before you would go home, they would sit you in the middle of this circle, and everybody in your group would, they would talk about, like, okay, let's talk about Mike. Let's talk about his addiction, but let's talk about ways that he might relapse, in there. And so I had gone through quite a few of these meetings, right, before people have gone home, and they always talked about the personal issues, emotional issues, and things like that might cause a relapse. And before the counselor even got started, I was sitting in the middle of this, the circle, and I said, I'm going to save you all a bunch of time. And I said, we don't need to sit here for an hour. And we would sit there for an hour anyway, but this is how I started off. We don't even have to sit here for an hour, but I'm just going to share this with you or ask this question. I know what's going to cause me to relapse. I know it. And I just sat there for a second. I said, it's going to be the pain. So I said, I don't want to sit here for an hour and hear all of these. I said, I don't have family issues. I don't have like these psychological issues, emotional issues and stuff like that some of you have to go through, which I feel greatly blessed for. But what I do have is the pain. And I said, so if you can help me, because I said, that will be the thing that will cause me to relapse, is the pain and having to deal with it. And that was the hardest thing, Scott, because my counselors, even the doctor that would see me when I was in there, I would say, I take this for the pain. What am I going to do for the pain? And their responses were all the same, right? Which is, I don't know, Mike, you're just going to have to figure that out. And that was very difficult to hear. So everybody in the room, that when we have this last meeting and I say, I just need help with how am I going to deal with the pain? Of course, there's nothing that they could do, that was very difficult for me. But I made it somehow, some way, man. I just gritted my teeth every stinking night for the next 3 years. It was hard though, right? It was the depression, the rage, just being angry at the world because I had to live with this pain for the next 40 years of my life. Had no idea that right around the corner, man, was my relief, with carnivore. No idea. And that I came across that by accident, which obviously we can get into. So
yeah. How did you find carnivore and like what clicked about it for you?
So it was, so I went to rehab in 2014, January or December of 2017 into January of 2018. I had just realized, and I got so tired of just living in the pain and having the depression and things like that, that I was like, I've got to lose the weight. I have a feeling that if I lose the weight and take the pressure off my shoulders and my back, that I will, I'll feel better, that I won't have the pain anymore. So I was like, I got to lose the weight. And this is, like I said, coming into the food addiction part. So I started watching all these YouTube videos because I've tried every diet, man. Weight Watchers, Nutrisystem, Slim Fast, Atkins, I don't know, you name it, whatever. I tried the cabbage soup diet. I did all of them, and all never dealt with the issue of food addiction, right? So I'm watching all these videos and I come across intermittent fasting. And I see people that are doing keto with intermittent fasting. We do it hand in hand, whatever. But I say, keto is extreme. I can't do keto, but I can do intermittent fasting. I'll try that. So January of 2018, I started doing intermittent fasting. And it was very difficult at first, especially if you're a food addict, right? And then trying to eat within just a tight window. But what I started noticing, the longer I fasted, if I went 24, 25, 26 hours, I started realizing that my joints and my shoulders didn't hurt. My back didn't hurt as much. But then I would eat, and, like I remember I'd go to Sonic, eat two or three double cheeseburgers or whatever. And then 2 hours later, man, my pain was back and I just felt miserable. And so I started figuring that out, and I'm thinking, I got to figure out why after I eat, I feel so crappy. And so I started, Googling, do certain foods cause inflammation? And it just led me down the rabbit hole to, yeah, lots of foods can cause inflammation. You have to be careful. And so then I came across keto. I was like, well, maybe keto isn't as bad. I thought keto was extreme. This is 2018, right? And so I decided maybe I will try keto. So I jumped on the keto bandwagon, had not heard the Joe Rogan podcast yet. And so I started doing keto. But the thing with keto is that, and like I said in the other podcast too, man, that I didn't do keto correct. Like I didn't eat the higher fat, and that sort of thing. And I would eat, I can eat 20 grams of carbs in a day, so I'm going to have a piece of bread, right? Well, when you're a sugar addict, that's not a good idea. But what would happen is I would go for like 4 or 5 days and I'd do really good. I'm thinking, man, I got this. I can make it work. But my pain wasn't getting less. But the other thing too is after that 4 or 5 days, I would binge. I couldn't stop. I would just eat, and I just eat whatever I could find, and I would eat for 2 days straight. Like I just kept binge eating, which I had a big issue with binge eating as well my whole life. And so I couldn't figure out what was happening. And I was still searching by this time. I still thinking there's got to be a way. I've got to lose the weight. This is crazy. And I don't remember for sure how in the world I saw it or whatever, but somehow I came across the Joe Rogan Sean Baker podcast. It blew my mind because I was sitting there thinking, like, he eats nothing but red meat. He eats nothing but ribeyes every day. I'm like, oh my gosh, dude! Like you've been told, right, that you're going to die of heart disease if you eat red meat and that sort of thing. And it was super extreme. But by this time, Scott, I was so desperate to find relief from the pain, to lose the weight, but mostly to find relief from the pain. I was like, what do I have to lose? I have nothing to lose. And I'm going to try it. And so I was still too scared, right? So I researched carnivore for another 3 months by this time. So we're getting into about August or July of 2018 now. I had lost about 50 pounds or 40 pounds by this time, just doing intermittent fasting mainly and a little bit of keto. So I was down to about 260 by this time, I think. And I finally got up enough guts. I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to try it. Everything I'm reading is that this is going to work. And so I think the thing that turned me completely over was a Kelly Hogan podcast that she did on, I think it was Biohackers Lab or something like that. I don't remember which one it was, but I remember her talking about it and how she, talked about all the things that it helped her with. And that's how it started. And within 2 days, man, I think it was 2 days, like my back pain went down to minimal and my joints stopped hurting and in my shoulders. It blew me away. I was like, man, this is the strangest thing I've ever experienced, and that's how it all started. And that's when it all clicked for me. Like the pain relief was so sudden and so drastic to me that I kept going. Right. And so I didn't stop. I've been doing that ever since. And that was September 24th of 2018 when I started. It's a very easy day for me to remember because that was the birth of my granddaughter, my first granddaughter. And so it's very easy for me to remember, but that's how it all started. And my life has never been the same since.
Wow. And what do you eat in a day now, or how has the diet evolved for you?
So I found out pretty quickly that I have quite a few food sensitivity issues. So I eat mainly beef right now, and it's probably about 2.5 to 3 pounds a day of beef. I don't eat a lot of eggs because eggs bother my stomach. I also, like you, which is kind of weird, I can't eat ground beef with the fat rendered in. I can eat beef patties grilled, and eat them that way, but I can't just, fry up a bunch of ground beef in a pan and then eat it, with a spoon. I just get super nauseous after doing that. But it's mainly steaks and bacon, really. And it sounds incredibly boring, but man, when it's, like I always say, when it's your medicine, you just take it and you enjoy it every second of it because you feel amazing. And so mainly it's 2.5 to 3 pounds of beef a day, water. Every once in a while, I might eat some pickles. I love pickles, but maybe once a week. But yeah, it's pretty boring, man. Just beef, salt, and bacon, basically.
It works. If it works, it
Oh
works.
yeah.
And what do you think you've learned about the connection between, do you think the carnivore diet obviously helped you with overcoming the sugar addiction, but do you think it helps you with your addiction to painkillers, or has it affected the cravings you've had for that at all?
Oh, absolutely. Yep. And like I said, it's not until within the last 6 to 9 months that I realized that I overcame the sugar addiction inadvertently, and mainly because I was looking for pain relief, right? And then the weight loss happened naturally or whatever. But this is a crazy thing that happened to me within, I think it was the middle of March. I started to have some pains in my lower stomach, and it was different than at first. I thought it was gas, but you don't have a lot of gas when you eat this way, right? So it was really odd. The pain was really odd, and it just kept getting worse and worse. And finally, my wife and my mom talked me into going to the emergency room, and my appendix actually had ruptured, and I had started having pains in my stomach probably, I don't know, in January or February or whatever, but it would just come and go, and I didn't think it was that big of a deal. But this one, the pain was just constant for 3 days straight. And I was in the emergency room. And I'll never forget this. The emergency room doctor's like, we need to give you some pain medication. And I was like, you know what? I've been living with this pain for 3 days. I think I'll be okay. And he's like, no, it's going to get worse because it's ruptured and you're starting to get infected. And I was in that emergency room I kept putting them off before they gave me the shot of fentanyl. And finally, after an hour and a half of being in there, he talked me into getting the shot. Fentanyl, I tried that when I was, taking the painkillers, and it was actually one of the worst painkillers that I had. And like, it did the worst stuff to me. The way that it made me feel, the anxiety, it wasn't a good feeling drug for me, but that's what they gave me a shot of. This is the reason why I'm sharing this, is because when I was in there, they also gave me Dilaudid. So when they put me in the room, I was in the hospital for like 5 days because they were just pumping me full of antibiotics and trying to keep the pain minimal. I was so scared during that time that I was going to keep taking the painkillers, especially the Dilaudid, and that I was going to relapse again. And so they gave me the push button thing. So like I'd push that, and I think they let me, like I could push it like 3 times every 10 minutes or something. I don't know what it was. I don't remember the number. But basically all I would do in my head, I was like, no, I'm only going to push it 3 times in an hour and make it last as long as I can. So I'm not overdoing this and I'm chasing the buzz or chasing the high or whatever. Because I was just so scared, that I was going to relapse again. And after the 4th or 5th day, they sent me home, and they gave me some hydrocodones, for being at home a little bit because the pain was still there. But I think I only took 2 pills out of there. And the reason why I share this with you is because I truly believe that because I had overcome my sugar addiction, that it wasn't the firing, you've been talking about the neurons, it's like that. It wasn't firing the same brain, I don't know, it's a synopsis or whatever you want to call it, synapses, where I was looking for some type of high, whether it was sugar or whether it was through the painkillers or whatever. I think it worked hand in hand. And that's why I only took 2 pills when I got home, and I haven't taken another one since. And I really believe that, again, looking at the insidiousness of sugar addiction and how it works, that in my case, the way my body metabolizes it, that the sugars or whatever, that that it causes that high, that it causes, I chase something when I eat sugar, and everybody does, but there's some people that can moderate, and there's some people that have to abstain. For me, I have to abstain because I will constantly try to chase that dopamine hit, or I'll chase that that high that comes from a sugar, no different, or a food, no different than I chase that buzz or that high with a painkiller as well. The other thing that it does is because I become super inflamed when I eat sugar, like if I eat sugar, even if it's on accident, like I know when I screw up something, like if I grab something, like if I'm on the road and I grab something that's processed or whatever, and it's got some dextrose or something else in it, and I will feel it within an hour or 2 hours. Like, man, why does my back hurt so bad? Why does my neck hurt? Why do my shoulders hurt? Like, and then I look at the ingredients, like, gosh dang it, man. I can't believe that I just ate that. And so not only does the not chasing that buzz from that sugar or whatever, or getting that dopamine hit help with the painkillers, but it also helps because it keeps my pain down, right? So I'm not worried about like, oh my gosh, how am I going to take care of my back pain that I have right now, or my shoulder pain or whatever. And so it helps on multiple levels. But when I look back at the whole thing or whatever, and how eating carnivore has actually showed me or inadvertently caused me to overcome my sugar addiction, it is really odd to me, how it works, because now I look at, like I said, I look at friends, I look at family, I look at people on Facebook, that everybody's constantly looking at, oh man, I got to lose weight. Oh man, I got to figure this out because I'm struggling with my weight or whatever. Or I mean, I joked the other day when I saw there was two people that were out taking a walk the other day, and they were really heavy set. And in your mind, you're like going, I know they're out there because they want to get healthy, right? Everybody's doing it. They want to get healthy. They want to get in shape. But what's sad is I look at that now and I think there's no way that they're going to walk their way out of their bad diet. This is never going to happen. And I think that's the thing that's kind of opened my eyes so much to this, is that most of the 110-pound weight loss has just basically been because I changed my diet, Scott. Like I don't work out a lot. And I just kind of let it happen or whatever. And I'm fascinated that diet affects not only your mental health, but your physical health so drastically. It blows me away. It just doesn't make any sense, but it's awesome.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. I think that's what I find the most interesting in all these conversations I've had, all the success stories. They're all incredible and mind-blowing, but really how impactful the diet can be on your mental state, your addictions, your mood, continues to baffle me.
Yeah. And yep.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, like the mood part of it, that zero carb Zen, that feeling of contentment and not looking at, looking forward to life and with stress or anxiety or things like that. It really is fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. Mike, this has been excellent. Thank you so much for sharing your story, for being vulnerable, for sharing what you learned and being so thoughtful and introspective. Where can folks find out more about you and follow along?
I mostly post everything about zero carb or carnivore on my Instagram page at zerocarb.roofer. And that's where people can find me there. And I love to share my story, love to share my successes and that with it. And I really appreciate this, Scott, as well, because you were one of the first podcasts I listened to. I think Danny Vega might have been the first one listened to in 2019. And so I've been listening to you ever since. And then Judy Chowan was, I think, not far right after that. So I appreciate your work too, man.
Thank you. Really appreciate that. Always great to hear. Well, I'll have links to all that in the show notes. And thanks again for your time, Mike.
Yep. Thank you, man. I appreciate it.
If you enjoy the show, please consider supporting the Carnivore Cast on Patreon. By becoming a patron, you'll help us reach more people and continue to create content on carnivore. There are also exclusive perks available, such as private Q&As, consultations with me, and more. Become a supporter at patreon.com/carnivorecast. Check the episode description for the link. Thank you, and I'll see you there. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Carnivore Cast. If you enjoyed this episode, please review on iTunes. It really helps us out. And share it with a friend. What questions would you like answered, or who would you like to hear from in the carnivore research community? You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at CarnivoreCast, or go to carnivorecast.com. You can also email me at info@carnivorecast.com. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, keep it carnivore.